Today on the channel, I'm going to tell you about my experiences I've had with Steve Vai. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I was going to tell you about my experiences that I've had with Steve Vai throughout my life. And this may be a little bit of a long drawn out story, but I figured it would be interesting, so I decided to post this on the channel. But I'll start by saying I started playing guitar back in 1985. Okay, I'm 53 as of the year right now in 2023. So I started at the age of 15, my first immediate influence on guitar was Ace Frehley in '78, but I was just a music fan at the age of 8 years old. I loved Kiss and immediately fell in love with metal and hard rock in the '80s because it was flamboyant and crazy and fun, right? So Scorpions, Twisted Sister, and then the mighty Van Halen. I got the Van Halen 1984 album when I was 14, 15, and MTV, you could not be a Van Halen fan after you saw their videos on MTV, right? So Eat 'Em and Smile had not come out yet, and I was introduced as a young guitarist to Steve Vai shortly after I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan at Cornell University. I witnessed Steve Vai in the movie Crossroads. And those were two very pivotal moments in my life as a musician and a fan. They were, think about it, seeing Stevie Ray Vaughan, Couldn't Stand the Weather, on tour, and then being exposed to Crossroads, right? Had no idea that Crossroads, what it even was about. I attended that movie with a friend, my best friend in high school, and his dad. We were waiting for his mom to get out of work, so we went and saw Crossroads. I happened to be just an innocent passenger in the car, and I loved it, right? And then the end with Steve Vai, it annihilated me, like it did a lot of us, right? If you're a Steve Vai fan, and I'm assuming you are if you're watching this, you know what I'm talking about. And to see that in the theater, it was scary. It was scary. That scene was kind of scary, but to see somebody with that much power and stage presence and control, I thought this has to be fake, right? So somehow I found out that his name was Steve Vai. I think I saw it in a magazine, right? A Guitar for the Practicing Musician magazine, and I brought a cassette recording to my guitar teacher, who used to figure out tablatures for me and show me how to do ear training, and he figured out the end dual for me and I've been practicing it ever since I was 15, right? Still can't get it right. And I bought the Crossroads soundtrack. Steve Vai wasn't on it. I was pretty bummed, so I went out and found Flexible on cassette, and I thought Flexible was cool. Viv Woman was rocking, Attitude Song was rocking, but I was not prepared for any of what I was about to hear on Flexible. So I kind of liked it, I kind of didn't. My young ears weren't quite ready for it. And we didn't have internet, so you couldn't look up a lot of stuff. So through interviews, I found out he played with Zappa. So I bought the album Jazz from Hell that had Steve Vai on it. I did not like that album. I was too young for it. It just wasn't my thing. And I couldn't find any Zappa stuff that sounded like Crossroads. And, so Eat 'Em and Smile came out shortly after that, and holy smokes, Eat 'Em and Smile was exactly what I was looking for. It really scratched the itch I wanted, from Crossroads. And I went on to see that tour live, and Tesla opened for them. And I took my girlfriend at the time. Some chaperones brought us to the concert, and I still have the concert jersey. And I saw Steve Vai on the second tour for Skyscraper, which, of course, Billy Sheehan wasn't on that. And no internet, had no idea why Billy left, right? So I got to see him then. And shortly after that, I remember Passion and Warfare came out. So Passion and Warfare was I had started recording instrumental music on cassette, and by now I was in school. I was in music school. I was taking music school at Binghamton University in New York. I was a theory and composition major, and Passion and Warfare came out, and I loved it, but it really depressed me because I just couldn't figure out how anybody could be so good, and it was so intimidating still, right? And I got to see Steve Vai play locally for Whitesnake, because Steve Vai was touring with Whitesnake at the time, and I bought Slip of the Tongue, and so it was a lot of really cool Steve Vai material from around '86 until maybe around, what was it, 1990, 91, 92, 90. Still never had a chance to see Steve Vai up close and personal, but I think at a moment in my life I was enamored with Steve Vai more than Eddie Van Halen. I mean, Eddie was always the king, right? But Steve Vai had this mystique about him and the technique. I was really so far into it, just the instrumental music. I couldn't sing, so I wanted to make instrumental music. So Satch and Vai kind of became my heroes for instrumental guitar music, and they set that bar for me to learn how to play better. And I've been recording myself doing instrumentals since I was probably 17, right? So I recorded myself throughout college and got out of college and moved to Nashville at the age of 22 in the early 90s, 92. And Sex and Religion came out shortly after that, and I love that album, and I was introduced to Devin Townsend. Later on, I named my youngest son, I have two sons, I named my youngest son Devin, and my first son's middle name is Vai. So I was totally obsessed, right? So incidentally, my other son's middle name is Marshall. So yeah, I was in my early 20s in Nashville, and Sex and Religion was my soundtrack, and I absolutely adored that album. And I was a Vai fan through all the grunge era, and I bought the Alien Love Secrets and loved it. Fantastic album. Juice is on there, and what else is on there? To Die Is to Live, I think that's the name of it. Tender Surrender. Bad Horsey, wicked songs. I think the only song on there I don't like is Yeah Yo Gak. I think that's on there. It was the son on that song. It was kind of goofy, but I get it, right? And that inspired me to even put my own sons on my recordings later on. I didn't have kids at the time. I didn't have kids until 2000 and 2002. So the 90s kind of went by, and I was writing. I was in a band playing original music. Still playing on Ibanez Gem 7W VH, and I was totally still into Steve Vai. No matter what came out, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Queensryche, Weezer, the Evan Roods in Nashville, whatever was popular locally, I was a Steve Vai guy. So in 1999, I got to go see the Ultrazone tour, and that was the first time I got to see Steve Vai up close and personal. And me and my drummer for my original band and a buddy of mine who plays drums went up to Louisville, Kentucky. We drove 2 hours up to Louisville and saw Steve Vai. And up to this point, I'd only seen Steve on big stages with Whitesnake and Roth. And it had been, maybe 8 years since I'd seen 8 or 9 years since I'd seen, probably 9 years since I'd seen Whitesnake. And we were front row, and I took some great pictures of Steve with my digital camera. And actually it was an Instamatic camera, I think. I think the film developed. And got to meet Steve after the show for the first time. And the look on my face and the vibe was so crazy. And I came prepared. I brought a bunch of magazine covers. I took magazine covers and I cut out some pieces of magazine interviews, full page pictures, and I put them in a little folder. And I took all my jackets for all my albums, all my CDs, right? And I thought, if I get to meet them, I'm going to get them to sign all these pictures. So I did, and I'll show you those in a minute, right? I'll show you these pictures. And so he signed all these, he signed, 10 or 15 pictures and all my jackets for my CDs. And he hung out, there's maybe 100 of us hanging out there. And I was on cloud nine. I don't think I came down from that moment probably for like 3 years. I was so excited. And it was such a great show. Mike Mangini played drums, Philip Bino was on bass, and Dave Weiner was playing, and Steve. I can't remember who else was in the band. I think that was it, man. He might have had somebody fiddling around on keyboards, but I think it was all Dave Weiner playing keyboards and rhythms. But they destroyed it. So into the 2000s we go, and the next time I got to see Steve was about 4 years later on the G3 tour. He was touring with Yngwie and Malmsteen. I think it was 03, 04, I want to say. And his bus driver mistook me for Steve. I was waiting for Steve outside his bus. I had on a NASCAR jacket, that was a Jeff Gordon coat, and I had my ponytail, and the tour manager came up to me. A bunch of us were waiting for Steve, and I had my Ibanez Gem. I was going to get him to sign the guitar, and he thought I was Steve. He's like, "Hey, have you seen so-and-so?" And I said no, and he left, and everybody laughed because they thought I was the tour manager thought I was Steve Vai, because I had my guitar with me in a case, and I was standing by the bus. He thought I was doing like autographs. Hilarious. Totally true story, right? So Steve didn't come out. He didn't come out. And I went back into the Ryman Auditorium. I snuck back in through the side door and got to pat Yngwie on the back and told him, "Nice show." And Yngwie was like, "Whatever, man." And Yngwie's wife asked him why he always had to be such a jerk. And that's a true story. And I wanted to see Satriani. I've never met Satch, but Satch was way off in the distance doing some meet and greet stuff for money, I think. So I went back to Vai's bus, and Vai finally came out about 20 minutes later, and I got him to sign my guitar, and he signed a few more pictures that I had brought from magazines, and that was great. And so I'm starting to sound like a stalker. I'm not really. I'm just a huge fan. So that was the second time I met Steve, and then in 08, I got to I want to say 08 or 2009 or 2008, I got to fly out to California, and I did this thing called the Alien Love Secrets thing, and went out to Anaheim. It was the weekend before NAMM. I didn't have NAMM passes, but I went out to Anaheim, and Steve did a little, it was like 30 people in there. It was maybe $300 to do it, and Steve did a 2-hour lecture class, talked about a bunch of esoteric things to us. And of course, afterwards, we got to meet him and hang out. And I got him to sign another guitar that I brought out there, and a couple more pictures. And I got a really cool picture with him there at the Alien Love Secrets. It was cool, Steve was talking about. He talked about everything from tuning your guitar to practice techniques to esoteric fundamental stuff that he. I really can't get into it because there was just so much, right? You could probably look online, and there's probably videos of some of his sessions. So it was pretty nice. Sadly, the guitar he signed that day and my Ibanez Gem that he signed at the G3 later got stolen from me, and they were two of my favorite guitars. So after that Alien Love Secrets thing, here's where the story takes kind of an interesting turn. Sam Ash Music around that time did a Best in Shred contest, and they gave you they were promoting. I think they were promoting some of Steve Vai's instrumental tracks. He put out the Naked Tracks albums, the CDs, back when we all used to buy CDs. And the rules were you were supposed to pick a song. There was a list of like 6 or 7 tunes to pick from, and you were supposed to perform one of those Naked Tracks. And the rules specifically stated you were supposed to play it as close to the original as you could, and then do some of your own personal embellishments for the solos, because they were going to judge you on stage performance, how close you played the song to the original and also your originality. And I remember the first time I went in, there was maybe about 50 or 60 people, and I did the contest. I don't think I've got any video of that, but I'll look, but I don't think I do. And anyway, I was a finalist. So the next, about a month later, they had another session. It was play the same song. So I had another month of practice. And I was playing the song Answers. I think it's Answers. It's the one that goes, right? So that song's got a lot of, during the solo of that song, it drones a lot over one tonality. So during the solo, I would stick with, I was doing Lydian stuff and Mixolydian and some pentatonic things. I tried to really showcase, shift gears and do different things. I worked very hard on it. And sadly, the judges, it was Eric, the bass player for Cinderella, was the judge, and somebody else, some country music guy, I think. And the judges had no clue what they were judging, meaning they didn't judge it for the rules. They just they went after whoever acted the craziest, and some guy that looked sort of like Dimebag Darrell wound up winning. So I went home with my tail between my legs, and the weird thing was, if you won that contest, you went on to the next regional finals, and I think they were going to do it in Texas or something. It was like 3 stages, and then you could play a show in front of Steve Vai. It was like step after step after step. Like the carrot was always at the end of the stick anyway, so who knows what would have happened. So nevertheless, a couple of years would go by, and a friend of mine from Sam Ash called me and said, "Hey Marty, we're doing another Steve Vai contest. We don't have a lot of entries. We'd like for you to stop by the store and submit an entry." So I stopped by the store, and this is around 2011, I think, or 2012, maybe 2013. 2013, summer of 2013. And I went into Sam Ash, and the rules were you had to do an Instagram post. You had to go into the store and shred for 40 seconds or something on a guitar, one of their guitars, next to the Steve Vai cardboard cutout, and then post your story on Instagram and tag Steve Vai's contest and tag Sam Ash in Instagram. And I knew that this Sam Ash up in Rivergate it's kind of far away out of town, so a lot of people may not know about this contest, and there's a lot of things you had to do to qualify to get into it. So I thought, man, my chances are pretty good on this one. And the rules were, if you won that store, you got to open for Steve Vai. So I entered it, and they picked me they were going to go through all the entries on Instagram, and they picked who they wanted to compete. So the day came after they called me and said, "Hey, you got selected." So I came in, and I only played against like 4 people. And the beauty of this contest was you could play anything you wanted. So I created an original track and had practiced to it for months, getting ready for this contest, for 3 months. So I had this original piece of music that I wrote down perfect, and I just let it rip. And I won the contest. Me and this other guy, his name was Rodney, he placed second, I think, and so they let us both open for Steve Vai. And the rule was, when he was in a theater or a concert venue nearest to your home city, you'd open up there. So Steve Vai was coming to the Bijou Theater in Knoxville, and I got to open the show at the Bijou Theater in Knoxville in front of Steve Vai, and I've got footage of that. It's not great, but I got some footage, and it cuts out at the end because the cell phone camera that someone was filming it on at the time, the cell phone got full of memory or something, so go figure, but I got most of it. So I got to actually meet Steve that day. I went there and got there early. Thomas, his guitar tech thing, his last name's Nordek. Thomas teched for me, and they treated me so good. I got there about 4 in the afternoon, and they were already set up, and they had a Marshall waiting for me at half stack. So I had a like a JCM 900 half stack, and I brought my pedals. I wasn't nervous because I knew my material, and the only thing that makes me nervous is equipment. I'm always afraid I'm going to have equipment failure, and I went out and bought a different pedal board and made sure all my cables were good, and I brought this little reduced pedal board to the show, and Thomas teched for me and got me set up, and I gave him a CD of my song. I brought a disc. I had an MP3 and a CD, and they played the CD, and they sound checked me, had big side fills, and everybody thought it was really cool. And they couldn't have been more gracious to me. So then I sound checked, and then Steve came out and sound checked for about 2 hours, maybe 90 minutes. And while he was sound checking, I was backstage, standing behind Thomas, looking at Thomas, tweaking Steve's guitars. I got to see the Ultra Zone guitar and hold it. And all of Steve's clothes were back there hanging up. I got to see all his stage clothes. So when he leaves the stage, he puts on a different shirt or something. And all his guitars were right there, in the little guitar area where Thomas works. So I could see him. I was right next to him. I didn't touch him because that would have been not cool. So I got to see Steve sound check, and then Steve went off. I guess he went to eat or whatever. And got to open the show, and I was really nervous. I thought the crowd would hate me, but they were really supportive, and it went off without a hitch. Afterwards, got to meet Steve, and we sat on the side of the stage. And I'm from upstate New York, and Steve's from Long Island. And we talked about being from New York State, and I told him about my sons. One's middle name is Vai, one's first name is Devin, and he thought that was really cool. Talked about him being a beekeeper, and we talked about wine country in upstate New York, and he's got a friend up there. And it was great. Me and Steve sat on the side of the stage. We probably talked for an hour and a half. It was really great, and I finally had to leave. I had to go pick up my kids from a babysitter in the area, one of my relatives that lived there. And that was like full circle. My whole life, just playing to play for Steve was, or in front of Steve, was tremendous. I did say to Steve, I said, man, I really was nervous playing in front of you. I didn't know how receptive your audience would be. And he's like, maybe back in the 80s, that might have been a thing. He goes, but my audience is really cool. They're really eclectic, and they like all types of music, and they're very supportive. And so he had really good things to say about his fan base. And he's really down to earth. He was really super nice, just like you would expect when you see him in videos. Then like 2 years later, I got to meet him I went and saw him at Marathon Music in Nashville, and I bought the Evo experience and got to talk to him in a room of about 20 people, and he answered a bunch of questions for us. The most interesting question he answered, I think, was from me. I asked him, how's he accomplished so much in his life and managed doing everything from raising kids to a solo career, to the Hendrix experience, to Generation X and G3 and the orchestras that he plays with, his private label and vacations and a marriage. And he told me that, you have to, he said, first of all, I got about 100 things I want to do, maybe 200 things, like projects. And he said, each one of them is going to take 5 years to finish. And he said, if I got 100 projects, literally, that are going to take at least 5 years to finish, he goes, that's 500 years, which I don't have left. He said, so you have to prioritize and pick 2 or 3 things and finish everything that you start. So when you start it, finish it. And he goes, when you're my age, you'll have amassed an accumulation of projects and material that you've finished. And it's staggering because you think, how could one person do all this? And it's just your life's work. And it made me feel better because on a much smaller scale, I feel like I have followed that roadmap and done those things. And it was very gratifying for Steve to basically say things that resonated with me, and I could say, okay, I'm doing okay. And he said to me, you can't measure fame or success on money alone, or your success on money or fame. He said success is if you please people and make people happy and bring good to life. And I thought that was really cool. So many of us get caught up in thinking clicks and likes and subscribers and album sales and money and fame, all that means you're successful. And yeah, that's a way to measure it, but when it comes to art and music, real success, if you're good at what you do, it resonates with people and you make people happy. I think the best compliment that I ever get is when people tell me I have really good tone, and that means more to me than anything. So I consider that a success. Anyway, after I got to meet Steve, I got to hold Evo, and didn't get to play it through an amp, but I got to hold it and play it acoustically, and it was nice. It had lots of chips and wear marks on it, but it was in great shape. It's his #1, obviously. Until now, I think he likes his black Pia, matte black and gold Pia better, from what he said in an interview recently. It's funny, I was wearing my rental shirt. It says rental. It's a Frank Zappa shirt. And Steve was standing near me when I was holding Evo, and he pointed at my shirt and he goes, "Somebody get this guy a shirt," because it said rental, and it was, he knew it was a Zappa shirt. And one of his lackey road people came around with a shirt and was like, "Who's the guy that needed a shirt?" And I was like, "Man, it was a joke. He was saying I needed a shirt because my shirt was a rental." And he's like, "Oh." And I thought he'd give me the shirt anyway, but he didn't. So I didn't get a shirt. So there you go. The last time I saw Steve Vai was the Passion and Warfare reunion, or what was it, the 30th anniversary or 25th, whatever it was. I saw him at the same place, and I didn't buy the Evo experience because I'd already seen him so many times and met him. I just want to save the money. And I went to that show, and the very end of the night, he was playing, I think, Attitude Song, and he ran off the stage around everybody that was seated, and I was standing there. He didn't recognize me, but it was luck. And he came up and he played right in front of me with his wireless unit, and I took a picture. I took a selfie with Steve. And then he ran up on stage and finished the show, and I thought, man, that was just so cool. So that was like the last time I got to really interact with Steve, was when he randomly ran out and stood next to me, and I took a selfie with him when he was playing. I was going to see him on his most recent tour in Nashville, but his tour bus broke down a few hours from Nashville that day, and he canceled. And he had canceled several months earlier because he had the shoulder surgery from when he damaged his shoulder when he was putting pizza in the oven. So I didn't get to see him. So anyway, I'll show you real quick some of these pictures. This is a Passion and Warfare magazine advertisement that I had him sign when I met him in Louisville, and then I had him sign this Sex and Religion cover on that Louisville date. I had him autograph this old picture. Some of these are so dusty. They've been sitting on a shelf somewhere. And here's a cool promo picture that I had him sign at one point. I don't remember when I had him sign that. And this is one of my favorites. Some of these frames are really lame. I don't know why I've got such weird frames on these, but this one, I love that picture of Steve. That looks like he's playing Tender Surrender on that one. I think that's when I met him in Louisville. This is when I met him. I think this was when I met him when I performed with him in Louisville. That's my favorite magazine cover with him. He's playing the original Green Meanie. I love this cover too. This one is neat right there. Again, I don't remember. Oh, that says 8/2012. All right, and then got just a couple more here. Then I've got this one. This one was from August of 2012. Okay, cool. And check this one out here. That's kind of neat. And let's see. Got two more I'll show you. It's got some cobwebs on these. Man, these are dusty. I should have cleaned them off. That's a really nice one. These are all great pictures. I'm glad I saved all my old guitar magazines. I destroyed them taking these pictures out, but I mean, I had a good reason to destroy them. And I got two more here. Oh, look at this. This is cool. Check that one out. It's got that DNA. I think that's a, oh, my glasses on, looks like a 7-string. And then when I did the Alien Guitar Secrets, when I met him in California, it was actually in Fullerton where I met him, which is kind of close to Anaheim, sort of out there. Fullerton's kind of a dump. But, so there you go. Anyways, I hope you like this kind of content, and I appreciate you listening to me about my history and affection for the music and personality and person that is Steve Vai. He's been a tremendous influence on me. I don't play a lot like Steve. You know, I think I lend myself more towards players like Eddie or David Gilmour, Tom Scholz, Billy Gibbons. But, you know, there's a little Steve Vai in my playing for sure. And I will always be a fan. And I appreciate the music he's given us over the decades. And I never, ever would have dreamt being a 16-year-old boy enamored with Eat 'Em and Smile, and 15-year-old boy watching Crossroads, that one day I would be on stage with the mighty Jack Butler and have him tell me that he thought I did a good job and get to hang with him, and that he's actually a super cool guy. And I wish him many more years of health, happiness, and music. I know Steve's not watching this, but in the rare chance that he is, thanks, Steve. I appreciate you and your art and your music. And I appreciate every one of you watching. Thank you for subscribing, and please comment below. And as always, have a great day. Peace out. That's a mega pint.